So we're going to continue Gestalt therapy with the second podcast and continuing with the onion. So we're going to talk about each of the layers specifically that Pearls discussed when peeling away those layers, right, in order to reach the person underneath, right, the genuine person underneath. So the first layer is the phony layer. And this is the way we react to others. And he said it was inauthentic and patterned. The idea is the same thing as the persona or the mask or a lot of the other things that we've talked about, is that we react to, we interact with people on a phony level. How are you? You know, we say, how are you? Oh, I'm fine, when we're really not fine, right? And so it's really important to realize that sometimes this phony layer works, but in order, when we're discussing an emotionally intimate relationship with another person, obviously a relationship on a deeper level, we don't want to interact on that phony layer. So that's why he's talking about peeling away these layers to get to the authentic person, specifically in counseling, right? So that's the phony layer. Once you get past the phony layer, you reach the phobic layer. Not that the person is scared of everything, but they tend to be a little bit fearful and helpless because they don't want to realize those parts of themselves or things that have happened to themselves that cause psychological pain. So the idea there would be avoidance, right? Would be denial. The person basically doesn't want to deal with it. So when you're in counseling and you're working with a client, the client would be less likely to talk about a difficult relationship that they've had. Or, you know, they come in and they're really upset, but they don't want to discuss why they're upset. Or they tell you basically why they're upset, but you can't get any real details because the person's trying to avoid that psychological pain. Once you work through that and the person trusts you, remember the relationship is always important in counseling, but also in Gestalt. Although you wouldn't know it from the way Pearls treated Gloria, right? But anyway, then you have impasse, which is when people get psychologically stuck. So a lot of people can move beyond the first and second layers, and then they just get stuck. They can't move. One of the things that happens if somebody is in an impasse is that they come into counseling because they want you to tell them what to do. Excuse me. For example, you'll have a couple that comes into counseling and they're not really in love. They have the idea of what the other person should be like, and they want you to tell the other person to be the way that they think that they should be. They blame each other. They're at an impasse. They can't go anywhere. Okay? It's clients at an impasse know that they need to make a change, but they often find lots of reasons why that change cannot happen. They feel stuck. They say that everything that they've done doesn't work, all of that kind of stuff. If you can get someone to work past that stage, then they're in the implosive stage. And this is when we start to become aware of our true self. Okay? The phony layer begins to collapse on itself. People will say things like, I feel dead inside. I don't know who I am. They implode on themselves. They're cut off from their former selves. They begin to experience some true feelings, but they don't do a lot about these feelings, so they don't feel connections. If they work past that stage, then they are in the explosive stage. And Pearl said that it is necessary to experience the explosive layer to become truly alive and authentic. It's the idea that you let go of your old self. You release the energy that you were taking to hold in all of those parts of yourself that what he would say are phony, right? And become true to yourself. You are authentic. You are without pretense. And that is when you are your true self. Now, one of the things that you have to understand is that there are what are called contact boundary disturbances. These are things that prevent people from having a healthy, emotionally close relationship with others, or having contact, right? These are boundary disturbances, things that mess up the mental health part of that, so that people are unable to have really healthy relationships. The first one is introjection. It's sort of like swallowing or taking on the values of others without reviewing them. The idea is that the person is oriented to external forces, and that prevents them from having genuine contact because they're focused on what other people or other values are from other people or things that they've heard or other groups, rather than what their true values are. Now, does this mean that people cannot have the same values as their culture or their family or their religion? No, you can absolutely. The idea is that they have integrated those values into their system, and they are the individual's real values, versus just taking on somebody else's values without really looking at them, just taking them on and calling it a day, so to speak, right? Projection is the dismissing or disowning of aspects of ourselves by assigning them to others. Okay, so the example of that is getting angry at a boss who yells at you for not completing your job when you know you didn't finish the job you were assigned. Instead of being angry with yourself, you're angry with somebody else, right? It's their fault versus it's my fault. It's projecting blame onto somebody else. It may help the person feel better temporarily, but it reduces full contact with others. Retroflexion is doing to ourselves what we want somebody else to do for us, or doing things for ourselves that we want others to do. If we do not, the idea of this is like, say, okay, I go out and buy my own birthday present. Well, that's an okay thing if I have something I want to buy and I want to treat myself. The difference is, when it becomes unhealthy, is not allowing others to buy birthday presents for me, but only buying my own birthday presents. The idea is that if you do not allow other people to do things for you, and not in a dependent way, but just being nice, right? Or being friendly, or being part of that relationship. If you don't have somebody help you in some way, then you are cutting off yourself from that relationship. And it will increase feelings of being lonely. So you have someone who is at work and completely takes on projects and does not allow other people to help. They do that, it's called the retroflexion. They might say they're being independent, but then they feel cut off from their coworkers. There are ways to help other people, or if somebody came up to them and said, oh, I'll help you with that project, I have some free time. Oh, no, I can do it. It shows a lack of trust, but it also is a control issue at the same time, right? The next one is dereflection. Deflection is indirect avoidance of contact. So it's avoiding contact, but doing it in a subtle way. So, but maybe being overly polite. Oh, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to do. Not getting to the point, so telling these long roundabout stories, but never actually discussing true issues or true meanings or true feelings. Okay? Deflection is also somebody that talks all the time, that you can't get them to stop and think. We have a lot of clients that will just continue to talk constantly. A lot of times I will literally make them stop talking and just take a breath and just think a little bit. Talking about something rather than talking about something rather than talking to someone. In other words, not having an actual conversation. There are times when clients need to come in and vent, and that's fine. But a client that continues to do that and not actually have part of a conversation with a counselor is practicing deflection. Okay? The other thing is sometimes people substitute mild emotions for strong ones. So they're a little upset when they should be extremely angry. So they allow themselves to feel a feeling, but they do not allow themselves to feel it completely. That doesn't mean that you let the feeling take over, but sometimes we get angry. And what they're doing is deflecting the real emotion with a smaller emotion. And another one is confluence, which is boundary between others and self becomes blurred. It's basically it's enmeshment is what we would call enmeshment, when the person is so caught up in the other person that they don't know who they are. So sometimes what you'll have is people that are in a relationship. When they begin the relationship, they have separate ideas, separate thoughts, separate political orientations, whatever. And a few years go by, or even not that much, to be honest, depending on who they are, all of a sudden you notice that everything that they say is the same. That there are no differences in opinions in topics that a year ago or wherever there were differences there. Now, some of that is becoming a couple, but when the people completely lose their point of view is when you have confluence. The idea here is that everybody has a strong need to be accepted, and they may relinquish their true feelings and opinions in order to be accepted by others. So if they're practicing confluence, then they're going to have a lot of difficulty thinking for themselves and truly feeling the feelings that they actually had. I'm sure you've realized it now that some of these parallel psychoanalytic defense mechanisms, although Pearls kept saying he's not influenced by psychoanalysis, he obviously was. One quick story is in 1936, he sailed a yacht 4,000 miles from South Africa to Germany to deliver a paper to the Psychoanalytic Society. This is before, obviously, he broke away. He was given an audience with Freud. And he was sitting in front of Freud, and he made some small talk by saying, "Oh, I came from South Africa to deliver a paper and to see you." Freud looked at him, closed his eyes, and said, "When will you be going back?" It pissed off Pearl so much that that was between that and the fact that during that, remember, that was the paper that they rejected, that he completely disavowed the Psychoanalytic Society. And he said that Gestalt therapy was the end of all that Freudian crap, but obviously not, because he was influenced by it. And so one of the things, though, that he did differ is in his experiments. Now, for each of his experiments that he does, and what I want you to think about is this counseling, Gestalt counselors do not just sit there and have clients go through experiments. There's a lot of discussion and what we would consider regular counseling on top of the experiments. Clients might not do an experiment every session. They might do an experiment every third or fourth session. It really depends on what happens in that relationship at that moment, right? Because it's about the here and now. So the experiments are to help bring a client into that here and now. They use them to present as a window through which we can work with the past and the future. And Gestalt therapists talk about the past and the future, but how it affects the person in the moment right now with me. Okay? In order to use experiments with clients, you really need to develop a strong therapeutic relationship. Now, one of the things about setting up the experiments that we're going to talk about is that setting them up is an art. You have to explain in detail what the experiment is, the objective of the experiment. So when I talk about them, I'll explain how to do that. You specifically say, "I would like you to try this." You ask the client if that would be okay, or are you comfortable with this? That's one of the few times you can ask closed questions, right? And you let them know that you don't have any preconceived notion of how this will go. I'm not sure what's going to happen. This is an experiment. Let's try it and see. Okay? You always are very careful with experiments. If you do not know how to do them correctly, you can actually damage clients. They're easily misused. People just throw them in every which way because they're interesting. Realize that sometimes counselors choose to use specific experiments because it meets the power needs of the counselor. But these open up great emotions in clients, and you have to be very careful that the reason you're using the experiment is for the client's benefit and not your own. You do not want to do experiments very early on in a relationship with clients because it opens up too much emotion immediately. And then the client will tend to shut down, and that will really hurt your relationship with your client. You need to provide time for integration within the counseling time frame. So within that 50 minutes, if you have that much time with clients, and time to discuss it and reflect upon it. Use sparingly. And every time you use something in counseling, every word you say, right, there is a purpose behind it. Intentional, right? The experiments will enhance awareness. Okay, and so these are particular experiments for that. So having a client become aware of his or her statements and questions. So you'll say, I would like you to be aware of what you're doing when you're sitting in the chair, or what are you aware of right now? Or I am aware that as you talk to me about this conversation with your mother, you sit stiffly in your chair, or you're holding your knees tightly. I see that you're laughing when we're talking about something serious. These are also considered client observation skills. I do not know what happened. There we go. All right. The second thing is emphasizing awareness. Asking a client to repeat a behavior. So if they pound their fist on the chair, say, wow, that was really interesting. I would like you to do that again. And then you talk to them about what they're feeling when they do it, what they're thinking, what's going on in the moment. This makes the figure, right, or what's in the background, much more clear. And they begin to realize that there are things in the background that are happening that affect them. The second, another thing that you can do for emphasizing awareness specifically is to stay with the feeling. Clients often will have a feeling in a session and then they move past it. They go back into cognitive, they think. So a lot of times I'll say, well, let's go back to that. And you can say, please stay in that feeling, but I don't know that hasn't ever helped any of my clients. But what you can do is go back to it, do a short paraphrase, and basically you can help hold them there. Tell them, take a moment to think about what to feel what they're feeling right now. The third thing, C, is exaggeration of behavior. This makes a client more aware of behavior. So if you're dealing with a couple and one person in the couple is very critical, you can actually have that person then be 5 times as critical, 10 times as critical, so that they begin to realize what they're doing, because sometimes people are not aware of their behavior. If somebody is pulling on their hair when they get nervous, you can have them tug their hair. I mean, not to the point where they pull all their hair out, but tug on their hair so they start really feeling what they're actually doing. And reversal, which, exaggeration of behavior, right? So reversal is the opposite of the exaggeration of behavior. It's basically asked to do something, but doing it in a different way. So you might be asked to continue talking about your mom, but without your critical tone. So the opposite of the way you were speaking. Someone who's very quiet and shy, you might ask them to yell really loud and look you in the eye to be more assertive. And this also helps people realize what's going on with their own behaviors. I do this regardless, is have clients use I statements instead of, and sometimes but if you, when they're directed specifically at the person in front of them, and then I statements when it's their things for themselves. So instead of saying things like, well, you work so hard and where does it get you? And I would say, you change that to, I work so hard and where has it gotten me, is a much more powerful statement and prevents the person from ignoring that part of self. They definitely have to connect with that part of self. I have them changing verbs from can't to won't, from isn't going to happen, I can't do that. That takes responsibility away. There are some things that people are unable to do for whatever reason, but the majority of time when people say, I can't study for this, or I can't pass this test, or I can't go do such and such, it's they won't do it or they don't want to do it. So I will have them change words. Okay. Another thing is using questions to make a statement. A lot of people say things like, do you want to mow the lawn this weekend? When what they really mean is, I want you to mow the lawn this weekend. So teaching clients to be a little more assertive in their communication patterns really makes a big difference. We're also enhancing awareness through nonverbal behavior. Okay, so this set of experiments specifically looks at things that's happening within the client's body, right? Expression of a person. Each behavior is an expression of a person at any given moment, and people are generally more attuned to their listening and listening to conversations than they are to what their physical body is doing. Okay? Individuals who are integrated, who've completed the Gestalt process, right, will have nonverbal and verbal expressions that match, but the majority of our clients don't, and so it's important to point out these inconsistencies. The reason we promote this awareness is to promote an understanding or being aware of not only of ourselves, but of others. So one of the things that you can do is being aware of self and others is having people take on other roles in a role play. They become an other, right? So take on the role of your mother and have your mother say that. So what they do is they become more aware of what's happening in a situation. Using dialogue, becoming aware through dialogue is one of the things that's important. Is you can have polarities of a person, the good boy versus the bad boy, right? The responsible one versus the impulsive one. Have a dialogue, or have the person write letters back and forth, or things like that. More awareness through enactment means sometimes I'll have couples act out a fight or a conversation or something that happened, or a family. And as they're going through the motions of that, they'll suddenly realize they said something that they didn't want to say, or they realize there's another way to do that. Another thing you can do is called top dog, underdog. Okay, so it's when the two parts of self, the one that is in control and the one that is not in control, talk to each other. The top dog is the part of the person that commands, directs, and scolds, tells them what they should do. And the underdog underfunctions and is inept. So you have someone that is a perfectionist, but they're having a hard time spending time with their family because they want everything perfect before they're able to go spend time with their family, right? So you have the perfectionist top dog talk to the fun-loving person and try to help them come to an understanding. Remember that middle ground. Okay? A lot of times what you can do is what they call empty chair, which means you have two chairs. You have the person sit in one, being the top dog, and then they stand up and they say something like, you have to get everything done or you can't go anywhere. Then they will stand up and they'll go and they'll sit in the other chair and pretend to be the underdog, where they say, but I want to go spend time with my family. I don't understand why this is stopping me. And have the top dog, underdog, or two parts of self have conversations with each other. Okay? The top dog, underdog. Empty chair, it's the same idea, different way of doing it. Empty chair is when a person takes on a role and speaks to an empty chair, which you pretend is like a person sitting there. So you say, what would you say to your father if he were sitting here? Okay. The difference between that is you're talking to another person, somebody that's not there. That helps the person vent. They can say things that they wouldn't normally say face to face with somebody, versus the top dog underdog 2 chairs, which is something that's a conflict that's happening within self. We also do some dream interpretation where you have the person can take on different parts of the dream, which is always interesting. And also you can have outside counseling, like homework, things that happen outside of counseling, things that you want them to do, which might be let your underdog take over for a little while or something like that. So those are different types of experiments, and there are many, many, many more. As always, if you have any questions, you can upload them to Blackboard or email them to me. Thank you.